The morning sky above New York looked normal enough, but Jake Morrison knew better. He stood at his office window 30 floors up, watching the massive alien ships floating like dark clouds over the city. They had been there for 3 decades now, and most people had gotten used to them. Jake never did. He remembered being 12 years old when the Corvin Empire first arrived in 2157. The alien fleet had appeared without warning, filling Earth's skies with vessels the size of cities. The first message had been simple and direct: surrender or die. To prove they meant it, the aliens had destroyed Mars Colony 7 in a single blast that could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. Jake touched the scar on his left hand, a reminder of the riots that followed. His father had been a police officer then, trying to keep order when the world was ending. The memory still hurt after all these years. The phone on his desk buzzed. Jake turned away from the window and picked it up. Lisa Carter's voice came through. The speaker tired but steady. "The morning shipment is ready," she said. 300 tons of rare metals and 50 new volunteers. Jake knew what volunteers meant. They were never really volunteers. The consortium had quotas to fill, and Earth's government had to provide them. Young people mostly, taken from their families to work in alien factories on distant worlds. Some came back after their service, many did not. "Any word from the families?" Jake asked. "Same as always. They accept the compensation and ask no questions." "What choice do they have?" Jake hung up and walked to his desk. As commander of the Earth Defense Corps, he was supposed to maintain order and cooperation with the alien occupiers. The job paid well and came with certain protections for his family. It also meant he had to help ship humans off-world like cargo. The Corvin had been smart about their occupation. They did not rule Earth directly. Instead, they allowed human governments to continue operating under their supervision. Earth's leaders collected the tribute, managed the workforce quotas, and kept the peace. In return, they got to keep their positions and their lives. Ben Turner understood this better than most. As mayor of New Geneva, he had spent 15 years walking the line between serving his people and serving the aliens. Every morning he signed orders that sent raw materials to alien ships. Every evening he went home to his daughter Amy, knowing she might be selected for off-world service. When she turned 18, the selection process was supposed to be fair and random. Ben knew it was anything but. Families with connections could buy their way out. Families with money could send their children to private schools in safe zones. Families like his, middle-class government workers, had no such options. Ben's wife Sarah had died in the early years of the occupation, during the food shortages that followed the initial panic. Amy was all he had left, and every day he feared losing her too. But he could not speak against the system without losing his position. Without his position, he could not protect anyone. The Corvin were not cruel rulers exactly. They provided adequate food, medical care, and housing for the human population. They did not engage in random violence or petty cruelty. But they were absolutely clear about the relationship between their species and humanity. Humans were useful. They were intelligent enough to operate complex machinery, skilled enough to perform delicate tasks, and numerous enough to provide a large workforce. They were also weak enough to be controlled and isolated enough to be dependent on alien technology. The consortium had scattered human workers across dozens of worlds, breaking up families and communities. This prevented organized resistance and made each individual worker more compliant. A human on an alien world had no choice but to obey or face exile into space. Jake had studied the alien system for years, looking for weaknesses. The Corvin controlled through superior technology and overwhelming force. Their ships could destroy entire cities, their weapons could level mountains, and their industrial capacity could rebuild anything humans managed to damage. But the system had grown comfortable over the years. The massive fleets that had first appeared over Earth were mostly gone now, deployed to expansion wars on the far side of the galaxy. The occupation force had been reduced to a token presence, just enough to maintain order and collect tribute. Most humans had accepted their fate. The older generation remembered the chaos of the early years and were grateful for the stability. that followed. The younger generation had grown up under alien rule and knew nothing else. Resistance movements still existed, but they were small, scattered, and ineffective. Jake kept his own thoughts to himself. As a government official, he was watched more closely than most. His communications were monitored, his movements tracked, and his associations recorded. Any sign of disloyalty would mean immediate removal from his position and probable selection for off-world service. Still, he could not stop himself from wondering. The aliens had superior technology, but they were not invincible. They had made mistakes before, and they would make them again. The question was whether humanity would be ready when that moment came. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the city. Below, the daily routine continued. Humans went to work, aliens collected their tribute, and the great ships hung in the sky like reminders of who really controlled the world. Jake Morrison returned to his desk and began processing the day's reports. Somewhere out there, other humans were having similar thoughts. The occupation had been stable for 30 years, but stability was not the same as strength. And humans, Jake had learned, were very good at waiting for the right moment to strike back. Dr. Helen Brooks had been staring at the same quantum equation for 3 hours when the breakthrough finally came. The numbers on her screen suddenly made sense in a way they never had before. She sat back in her chair, heart pounding, and realized she had just discovered something that could change everything. The underground laboratory beneath the Colorado mountains had been her home for the past 5 years. The government had built it in secret, disguised as a geological research station. Helen and her small team were supposed to be studying earthquake patterns. Instead, they had been taking apart alien technology piece by piece, trying to understand how it worked. Helen had always been fascinated by the way the aliens communicated. Their ships, their bases, their equipment, everything was connected through some kind of instant communication system. Messages could travel from Earth to the far side of the galaxy in seconds. Human scientists had tried to figure out how it worked for decades, but the alien technology was too advanced. Until now. Helen called to her assistant, Dr. Peter Kim, who was working at a station across the room. "Peter, come look at this. I think I found something." Peter walked over and looked at the screen. The equations were complex, but he could see what Helen was pointing at. The alien communication system was based on quantum entanglement, but it was not as perfect as everyone thought. "Is that what I think it is?" Peter asked. "A weakness," Helen said. "The whole system has a single point of failure. If we can access the right frequency, we can inject false signals into their network." Peter sat down heavily. "Helen, do you realize what this means? If we can hack into their communication system, we could coordinate resistance across the entire galaxy." Helen nodded. She had been thinking about the same thing. For 30 years, humans had been scattered across alien worlds, isolated and unable to organize. The aliens had done this on purpose, making sure no large groups of humans could work together. But if they could communicate secretly through the alien network itself, everything would change. The next few weeks were the most intense of Helen's life. She and Peter worked with Dr. Susan Wright, a computer specialist who had been studying alien data systems. Together, they developed a way to hack into the alien network without being detected. The first test was small. They sent a simple message through the network to a human research station on Europa. The message was disguised as routine maintenance data, but it contained a hidden code that only humans would understand. The response came back 12 hours later. The humans on Europa had received the message and understood it. They were ready to help. Meanwhile, Captain Tony Garcia was building a different kind of network. For years, he had been collecting intelligence from humans working on alien worlds. His contacts were scattered across the galaxy, but they all shared the same goal: freedom. Lisa Carter on Keth Prime had been one of his most valuable sources. She had access to alien industrial facilities and could observe their security procedures. More importantly, she had been quietly identifying other humans who might be willing to fight back. Tony received her latest report through a coded message, hidden in a routine work evaluation. The news was better than he had hoped. The aliens had grown careless over the years. Their security was designed to prevent external attacks, not internal sabotage by their own workers. "They don't see us as a threat," Lisa had written. "We're just tools to them. They watch us about as closely as they watch their machines." Tony shared this information with Colonel Steve Martinez, the highest-ranking human military officer who had managed to stay in position. Steve had been walking a careful line for years, appearing to cooperate with the aliens while secretly maintaining contact with resistance groups. When Steve learned about Helen's discovery, he saw the possibilities immediately. "We could coordinate strikes across dozens of worlds simultaneously," he told Tony. "Hit them everywhere at once before they can respond. But the plan would require perfect timing and absolute secrecy. One mistake, one intercepted message, and the entire operation would be discovered." The aliens would not be gentle with traitors. Helen's team worked to perfect their hacking technique. They discovered that the alien network was even more vulnerable than they had first thought. The quantum entanglement system was so complex that the aliens had built in automated systems to maintain it. If those systems could be corrupted, the entire network would collapse. Dr. Susan Wright developed what she called a quantum virus. It was a piece of code that could spread through the alien network, causing system failures throughout their empire. The virus would activate at a predetermined time, giving human resistance groups the chaos they needed to strike. The most dangerous part was making contact with humans across the galaxy. Every message carried the risk of discovery, but slowly, carefully, the network grew. Mining supervisor Carl Lewis on Vega 4 agreed to help. Research technician Kate Johnson on the Nexari homeworld confirmed she could access critical systems. Dozens of others sent back coded messages of support. Each contact had to be made to look innocent. Helen's team developed a system of codes, hidden in normal communications. A request for spare parts might actually be coordinates for a weapons cache. A complaint about food quality could be a signal that someone was ready to join the resistance. The aliens never suspected. They had grown so comfortable with their control over humanity that they could not imagine their subjects organizing against them. The quantum communication network that was supposed to be their greatest strength was becoming the tool of their downfall. Helen stood in her underground laboratory, watching data flow across her screens. Somewhere out there, humans were preparing to fight back. The network was almost complete, the virus was ready, and the moment was approaching. For the first time in 30 years, humanity had a real chance at freedom. The question was whether they would be brave enough to take it. Colonel Steve Martinez knew he was walking into the most dangerous meeting of his life. The small conference room in the government building looked normal enough, but the three people sitting around the table were about to commit treason against the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Lieutenant Colonel Rick Thompson sat across from him, looking nervous but determined. Major Julie Anderson was studying a datapad, her face serious. These were officers Steve had known for years, people he trusted with his life. Now he was about to trust them with something much more important. "What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room," Steve said quietly. "If anyone discovers what we're planning, we'll all be dead within hours." Rick leaned forward. "We're listening." Steve explained Helen's discovery about the alien communication network. He told them about the quantum virus and the growing network of human resistance across the galaxy. When he finished, both officers sat in stunned silence. "My God," Julie whispered. "You're talking about a coordinated uprising across dozens of worlds. The aliens will crush us, maybe," Steve said, "but they'll have to find us first. And if we hit them everywhere at once, they won't know where to look." The planning began immediately. They needed to identify every human military officer who could be trusted. They needed to locate weapons and equipment that could be used against alien forces. Most importantly, they needed to do all of this without attracting attention. Dr. Helen Brooks was working on a different kind of preparation. Her quantum virus was ready, but she needed to test it on a larger scale. Working with electrical engineer Bob Fisher and computer specialist Nancy Powell, she prepared to hack into a major alien communication hub. The test came at midnight on a Tuesday. Helen activated the virus and sent it into the alien network through a maintenance port they had identified weeks earlier. For 30 seconds, every alien communication system in the solar system went dark. The aliens never knew what happened. Their automated systems registered the outage as a routine maintenance glitch, but Helen and her team knew the truth. The virus worked, and it worked perfectly. On Keth Prime, Lisa Carter was conducting her own preparations. She had spent months identifying the key systems that kept the alien industrial complex running. Power generators, environmental controls, security, networks, everything had weak points that could be exploited. More importantly, she had been talking to other humans. Maintenance worker Dave Clark had access to the alien military depot. He had been quietly documenting security procedures and guard rotations. Janitor Amy Foster worked in the Nexari government building and had discovered that the aliens barely noticed human service workers. "They see us as invisible," Amy had told Lisa during one of their secret meetings. "I can walk into rooms where they're discussing classified information and they don't even stop talking." Lisa used this invisibility to gather intelligence. She learned that the Corvin military was planning to reduce their presence on human worlds even further. Most of their forces were being redeployed to fight expansion wars on the Galactic Rim. The occupation force would soon be down to skeleton crews. The resistance had to move fast. Every day they delayed was another day for the aliens to discover their activities, but they also had to be careful. One premature action could expose the entire network. Tony Garcia was coordinating with resistance cells across the galaxy. His network had grown beyond anything he had imagined. Mining supervisor Carl Lewis on Vega 4 had recruited a dozen other humans who worked in the asteroid mining operation. Research technician Kate Johnson on the Nexari homeworld had made contact with humans in the government district. Each cell was being trained in basic sabotage techniques. Former military personnel like Sergeant Bill Murphy used their positions as work supervisors to teach combat skills disguised as safety drills. The aliens never suspected that emergency evacuation procedures were actually assault tactics. Equipment was the biggest challenge. Humans had no weapons that could match alien technology, but they had something else: knowledge of the systems they had been maintaining for decades. Maintenance Chief Roy Adams had been collecting spare parts and tools for years, storing them in hidden locations throughout the facility. "We don't need to outfight them," Tony explained to his cell leaders. "We just need to break their stuff faster than they can fix it." The psychological preparation was just as important as the physical planning. Many humans had spent decades accepting their fate as subjects of the alien empire. The idea of fighting back was terrifying, but it was also exciting. Lisa Carter watched her fellow humans as they went about their daily routines. Most had no idea what was being planned. They woke up, went to work, followed orders, and went to sleep, but a growing number were beginning to look different. They walked with more purpose, spoke with more confidence, and worked with more focus. The aliens noticed none of this. They saw what they expected to see: compliant human workers doing their jobs efficiently. They had no idea that those same workers were preparing to destroy everything they had built. Helen Brooks stood in her laboratory, watching the final preparations. The quantum virus was ready to deploy. The resistance network was in place. The target date had been set. In just a few days, humanity would either win its freedom or face complete destruction. But for the first time in 30 years, humans were not just hoping for a better future. They were planning to create one. The countdown reached 0 at exactly 3 in the morning Galactic Standard Time. Dr. Helen Brooks pressed the activation key and sent the quantum virus into the alien communication network. Across the galaxy, 30 years of careful planning was about to explode into action. The effects were immediate and devastating. On Keth Prime, Lisa Carter watched the alien overseers suddenly stop talking to each other. Their communication devices went silent, their computer screens went dark, and their confident expressions turned to confusion and fear. "Now," Lisa whispered into her hidden radio. Dave Clark and his team moved first. They had been positioned near the power generation facility for hours, waiting for the signal. When the alien security systems failed, they rushed inside and began placing explosive charges on the main generators. The alien guards tried to stop them, but without their advanced weapon systems and communication network, they were just ordinary beings facing desperate humans. Dave had been maintaining these systems for 15 years. He knew every weakness, every backup system, every way to cause maximum damage on Vega 4. Mining supervisor Carl Lewis was leading his team through the asteroid mining complex. The Corvin garrison had been caught completely off guard. Their sophisticated security systems were useless without power, and their weapons were locked in an armory they could no longer access. "Remember, we're not here to fight them," Carl told his people. "We're here to wreck everything they need to control us." His team spread out through the facility, destroying mining equipment, sabotaging life support systems, and sealing off the main tunnels. The aliens would survive, but they would be trapped and helpless until rescue arrived. On Earth, Colonel Steve Martinez was leading the assault on the Alien Administrative Center in Geneva. His forces had been training for this moment for months. But the reality was more chaotic than any simulation. The alien building was a fortress of advanced technology, but that technology was failing. Doors that should have been locked were opening randomly. Security barriers were shutting down. The alien bureaucrats inside were running around in panic, trying to understand what was happening. Major Julie Anderson's team hit the communication center first. They found the alien technicians frantically trying to restart their systems, but every attempt failed. The quantum virus was spreading through their network faster than they could contain it. "Surrender and you will not be harmed," Julie announced through the building's speakers. But she knew the aliens would not give up easily. The most spectacular success came on the Nexari homeworld, where research technician Kate Johnson had spent months mapping the government district. When the alien communication systems failed, she led a small team of humans into the heart of the Nexari power structure. Kate had learned that the Nexari relied completely on their technology for everything. Without their computers and communication devices, they were helpless. She and her team walked into the main council chamber and found the alien leaders sitting in darkness, unable to call for help. "We are taking control of this facility," Kate announced. "Comply with our instructions and no one will be hurt." The Nexari chancellor looked at her in shock. For the first time in his long life, he was facing humans who were not afraid of him, but the aliens were not completely helpless. On some worlds, backup systems came online after the initial shock. The Corvin battleship Iron Talon had been conducting exercises in deep space when the virus struck. Its isolated systems were unaffected, and Admiral Vex Corvin immediately ordered it to return to Keth Prime. The counterattack began within hours. Corvin shock troops, equipped with weapons that did not rely on the compromised network, began fighting back. On Earth, the battle for Geneva turned into a deadly struggle as alien reinforcements arrived. Lieutenant Colonel Rick Thompson's forces were holding the main government building, but they were taking heavy casualties. The aliens had superior armor and weapons, and they were fighting with the desperation of beings who had suddenly lost control of their empire. "We can't hold them much longer," Rick reported to Steve Martinez. "We need to fall back." Steve had expected this. The human resistance could not win a straight fight against alien technology, but they could make the cost of victory unbearable. "Execute Phase 2, Steve ordered. Across the galaxy, human sabotage teams began the second part of their plan. They had seized what they could, but now they would destroy what they could not hold. If the aliens wanted their empire back, they would have to rebuild it from scratch on Keth Prime. Lisa Carter watched her demolition charges destroy the main industrial complex. 15 years of alien construction disappeared in a series of massive explosions. The facility had processed rare minerals worth billions of credits. Now it was just smoking rubble. Dave Clark's team had done their work well. The power grid was collapsing, life support systems were failing, and the alien communication network was still down. The Corvin garrison was alive but effectively neutralized. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Human workers who had been invisible servants for decades suddenly became saboteurs and fighters. They used their intimate knowledge of alien systems to cause damage that would take years to repair. The aliens finally understood what they were facing. This was not a simple rebellion that could be crushed with overwhelming force. This was a coordinated attack by people who knew their systems better than they did themselves. Helen Brooks watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. The quantum virus was working perfectly, spreading through the alien network and causing chaos everywhere it touched. But she knew this was just the beginning. The real war was about to start. Admiral Vex Corvin stood on the bridge of the Iron Talon, staring at reports that made no sense. In his 200 years of military service, he had never seen anything like the human uprising. Dozens of worlds were in chaos, critical facilities were destroyed, and his communication network was still failing. The first reports had seemed impossible. Humans were primitive creatures, useful for labor but incapable of real military action. They had no advanced weapons, no coordinated leadership, and no understanding of galactic warfare. Yet somehow they had struck simultaneously across the entire consortium territory. "How many facilities have we lost?" Vex Corvin asked his tactical officer. 30% of our industrial capacity is offline, came the reply. The mining operations on Vega 4 are completely destroyed. The processing plant on Keth Prime is gone. Even the government complex on the Nexari homeworld has been compromised. Vex Corvin felt something he had not experienced in decades: doubt. The humans had done more damage in one day than the consortium's enemies had managed in years of warfare. On Earth, the battle for control was entering its second week. Colonel Steve Martinez had been forced to abandon the government buildings in Geneva, but his forces had not surrendered. Instead, they had melted into the countryside and underground networks that the aliens had never known existed. The Corvin shock troops found themselves fighting an enemy they could not pin down. Every time they secured a position, the humans would attack somewhere else. Every time they moved to respond, their original position would be sabotaged. Major Julie Anderson was leading one of these mobile units. Her team had destroyed 3 alien supply convoys in the past 5 days, using improvised explosives and hit-and-run tactics that the aliens could not counter. "They're trying to fight us like a conventional army," Julie explained to her squad leaders. "But we're not an army. We're everywhere and nowhere at the same time." The aliens were learning this lesson the hard way across the galaxy. On Keth Prime, the arrival of the Iron Talon had forced Lisa Carter and her team to abandon the industrial complex. But as they retreated, they activated the demolition charges that Dave Clark had spent months positioning. The explosion was visible from orbit. The rare mineral processing facility, which had taken the aliens 5 years to build, disappeared in a cloud of fire and debris. With it went the equipment and expertise needed to extract the materials that powered much of the consortium's technology. Lisa's team had escaped into the vast underground tunnel system that connected the planet's mining operations. The aliens knew the tunnels existed, but they had never bothered to map them completely. Now those same tunnels were hiding hundreds of human saboteurs. The consortium leadership was facing a crisis unlike anything in their history. In the Grand Council chamber on the capital world of Corvin Prime, Chancellor Thek Nexari was arguing with General Thek Corvin about how to respond to the human uprising. "We should negotiate," the Chancellor insisted. "The cost of rebuilding everything they have destroyed will bankrupt our expansion programs. We are fighting wars on 3 other fronts. We cannot afford to waste resources on rebellious humans." "General?" Thek Corvin slammed his fist on the council table. "Negotiate with primitives? Never. If we show weakness now, every subject species in the galaxy will rebel. We must crush the humans completely, even if it means destroying their entire species." The debate raged for hours while the war continued. Reports kept arriving of new attacks, new sabotage, new failures of their systems. The quantum virus that the humans had unleashed was still spreading through their network, adapting to every countermeasure they developed. Dr. Helen Brooks had anticipated this. Working with engineer Bob Fisher and the remnants of her team, she had created a virus that could evolve. Every time the aliens thought they had contained it, it would find a new way to spread. It's learning their systems faster than they can change them, Bob reported. The more they try to fix their network, the more vulnerabilities they create. But the aliens were not giving up. General Vec Corvin had authorized the use of orbital bombardment against human positions. Cities on Earth began to burn as Corvin. Battleships rained destruction from space. The bombardment of New Geneva was meant to break human morale. Mayor Ben Turner, who had spent decades trying to protect his people through cooperation, died in the first wave of strikes. But instead of surrendering, the human resistance seemed to grow stronger. Captain Tony Garcia had prepared for this possibility. His network of resistance cells had been trained to operate independently, without central command or control. When one cell was destroyed, 2 others would take its place. The humans had learned something during their 30 years of occupation: how to survive when everyone was trying to kill them. They knew how to hide, how to scavenge, how to turn anything into a weapon. Most importantly, they knew how to keep fighting when there was no hope left. On the galactic rim, other alien species were watching the human uprising with great interest. The Andorian Trade Federation, the Zephyrian Republic, and a dozen other powers had been fighting the consortium for decades. Now they saw an opportunity. If the humans could tie down consortium forces in their own territory, it would leave the rim worlds vulnerable. Several alien powers began quietly supporting the human resistance, sending weapons and supplies through hidden channels. Admiral Vex Corvin received these reports with growing alarm. The human uprising was not just a local rebellion anymore. It was becoming a galactic war that could destroy the consortium's empire. Standing on his bridge, watching the lights of burning human cities on the screen, Vex Corvin realized that the galaxy had changed forever. The species they had dismissed as primitive servants had become an enemy that could threaten their entire civilization. The question now was whether the consortium could destroy humanity before humanity destroyed them. The war that historians would later call the Human Liberation War ended not with a great battle, but with exhaustion on both sides. 18 months after the first strike, representatives from Earth and the consortium met on the neutral world of Kepler 442b to discuss terms that neither side had ever imagined possible. General Steve Martinez, promoted after Colonel Steve Martinez died in the bombing of Geneva, sat across from Admiral Vex Corvin in a simple conference room. Between them lay the future of human-alien relations in the galaxy. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of translation devices, but both leaders knew that billions of lives depended on what happened next. The war had changed everything. The consortium had lost nearly 30% of their industrial capacity, and their expansion wars on the galactic rim had collapsed into desperate defensive actions. Other alien species, seeing the consortium's weakness, had launched their own attacks on alien territories. The Andorian Trade Federation had been the first to act, seizing 3 star systems that the consortium could no longer defend. The Zephyrian Republic had followed, launching raids that destroyed key consortium supply lines. What had started as a human rebellion had become a galactic war. Steve Martinez looked tired but determined. He had spent the past year leading human forces in hit-and-run attacks that the aliens could never predict or prevent. His people had learned to fight like ghosts, striking without warning and disappearing before the aliens could respond. "We want recognition of human autonomy," Steve said simply. "Earth and the 12 worlds where our people work will be governed by humans. No more tribute, no more forced labor, no more treating us like property." Admiral Vex Corvin had aged decades in the past 18 months. His once mighty fleet was scattered across the galaxy, trying to hold together an empire that was falling apart. The quantum virus that the humans had unleashed was still causing problems, and his technical experts said it might take years to completely remove it from their systems. "You are asking us to abandon centuries of established order," Vex Corvin replied. "The consortium has ruled this galaxy since before your species discovered fire. Maybe it's time for a new order," Steve said. The negotiations took weeks. Every Detail had to be worked out carefully because both sides knew that failure would mean the war would continue until one species or the other was completely destroyed. Lisa Carter, now serving as the administrator of Keth Prime, had transformed the destroyed industrial complex into something new. Working with both human engineers and alien technicians who had chosen to stay, she was building the first truly integrated research facility in galactic history. The project was a symbol of what the new relationship could become: human creativity and determination, combined with alien technology and knowledge, was producing innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. The facility's first breakthrough had been a new type of quantum communicator that was immune to the viruses that had crippled the old. NETWRK Dr. Helen Brooks was working at the Earth facility that had grown from her underground laboratory. Alien scientists, fascinated by her quantum virus research, had asked to collaborate with her. Together, they were developing communication systems that would be more secure and more efficient than anything the galaxy had ever seen. "They're not so different from us," Helen told her assistant, Dr. Peter Kim. "They want to understand how things work, just like we do. They were just taught that they were better than everyone else." Not everyone was happy with the peace negotiations. General Vec Corvin, stripped of his command but still influential among Corvin military officers, was organizing opposition to any agreement with the humans. He believed that showing weakness to humans would encourage every other subject species to rebel. On the human side, Captain Tony Garcia's resistance network remained active and suspicious. Many humans found it hard to trust aliens who had oppressed them for 30 years. Tony himself had lost too many friends in the war to easily forgive, but the economic reality was forcing both sides toward peace. The consortium could not afford to rebuild their empire while fighting expansion wars and dealing with other rebellions. The humans could not maintain their guerrilla campaign indefinitely without eventually losing everything. The breakthrough came when the Nixari chancellor, speaking from his restored capital, offered to mediate the final terms. The Nixari had been the most reasonable of the consortium species, and they understood that the old system of total domination was no longer sustainable. The treaty that emerged was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The consortium would recognize human autonomy over Earth and 12 other worlds. The tribute system would be replaced by trade agreements between equals. Humans would have the right to travel freely throughout consortium space, and aliens would have the right to visit human worlds under agreed conditions. Most importantly, both species would work together to develop new technologies and explore new regions of the galaxy. The war had shown that cooperation could achieve more than domination. Lisa Carter stood on the observation deck of the new research facility, watching human and alien engineers work together on projects that would have been impossible just 2 years earlier. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was no longer just along for the ride. Steve Martinez signed the final peace treaty 6 months after the negotiations began. As he put down the pen, he thought about all the people who had died to make this moment possible. The war was over, but the work of building a new relationship between humans and aliens was just beginning. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about underestimating humanity. As new human colonies were established, and the first human-designed starships prepared for launch, it became clear that the species once considered primitive subjects had become a force that would shape the future of galactic civilization. The war was over, but the real test of humanity's place among the stars was just beginning.